Now, when it comes to the border, let me go back. This is a problem of the president's own making. And then he says he wants to solve the problem so that we can stop this influx, but then he changes his mind. We've got a president that's AWOL.
President Obama met with leaders from Central America today to discuss the crisis at the U.S. border. In the past year, tens of thousands of unaccompanied kids have poured across the unguarded international border. The word is out. If you get in, well, you get to stay in. Obama will let you stay, and he'll hope you'll vote Democrat. Central American leaders are now asking Washington for help. You might think it would be the other way around, but no. Say, the president of Honduras says his country's children are being abused on the way to America.
Young girls, 13-year-olds, the coyotes or human smugglers, give them birth control pills because most of them are going to be sexually abused.
So how can this problem be solved? Or does Obama even consider it a problem? Joel Pollack is a senior editor at Breitbart.com. He joins us with more from L.A. Joel, it's amazing to me that presidents of Latin American, Central American countries are more concerned about this than the president of the United States, into whose country these tens of thousands of kids are flowing. Obama doesn't give a damn. He's busy golfing.
That's right. And what he really cares about is the political pressure he feels this brings onto Republicans in Washington to pass some version of immigration reform. That's how he has been describing this. That's how other Democrats have been describing this, as a reason to pass comprehensive immigration reform, what conservatives call amnesty, which would essentially allow many of these recent illegal immigrants to stay, as well as the roughly 11 to 12 million inside the country, and some sort of guarantees of border security that no one really believes. So Obama says, we've got to pass my bill. Republicans have failed to pass the bill, and in fact, that failure has led to this crisis, when in fact it's Obama's own failure to enforce the law that has led to this crisis. So he's using it for political purposes, and that's why golf seems perfectly appropriate to him, I suppose, because he doesn't intend to secure the border. He just wants to secure some votes in November.
You know, this is a strategy. I think if you know Obama's political history and those around him, this is classic Alinsky tactics. It's classic the worse, the better radicalism tactics that, you know, if you create what would in other situations be called anarchy, like an international crisis, then you can pose yourself as the solution to the problem with something that previously would never be acceptable. I think the worse these kids look, the more trouble they're in, the more broken Obama can make the current system. As you say, the more likelihood that he can ram through his solution to the problem he manufactured.
That's correct. You're referring, I think, to the Cloward-Piven strategy, which was a strategy developed by radical Alinskyite organizers and theorists in the 70s to basically overflow or flood the welfare rolls in the United States and basically destroy our existing system for redistributing income to the poor, so that the United States would be forced into a massive redistribution, not just kind of charity support for people with low incomes, but an absolute redistribution of wealth on more communist lines. So if they could destroy the existing welfare system, which they saw as an impediment because it took away some of the pressure on the capitalist class, they could then force a massive redistribution on a more totalitarian scale. So likewise with the border, there are some who believe that by flooding the border, by flouting the law, by forcing this crisis to a head, they would require the system as a whole to change rather than dealing with border problems as they arose. They see additional border security, additional troops, and so forth as Band-Aid measures that prevent the radical realignment they are seeking. So they want to use this crisis in that same vein. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that there's some thinking behind that in the White House. For example, there were contract requests that went out earlier in the year for people to assist with the guidance of 65,000 or so undocumented minor children across the border. There were grants that went out to church groups in the area over the last several years to provide housing to undocumented or illegal aliens crossing the border. So there's been a kind of radical uptick in not only the people arriving, but in the efforts to prepare for their arrival. And that does suggest that the Obama administration may have, although some describe this as a conspiracy theory, it does have some evidence to back it up, that the Obama administration may have wanted this crisis in order to force Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. I should add that it's not just Democrats who are doing this. There was an article yesterday by Republican Jeb Bush, who's thought to be a very strong advocate for immigration reform, saying that what this crisis really needs is immigration reform. Of course, what many Americans are saying is what it really needs is border security and law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying to my Canadian viewers, who are 99% of them, that having 11, 12 million illegals in your country, that would be like 1 million Canadians. I mean, America is a little bit more than 10 times. It's about 10 times the size. But if we had 1 million people in this country, it's almost as big as the city of Calgary. That's, you know, it's such an enormous number that sneaked in. I mean, it's not even that they came in and they're sort of in process becoming Canadians. They sneaked in. They're not paying taxes. They're taking services, and that would be an enormous scandal. Normally, we Canadians, I think, are less attentive to our rights and our borders and our sovereignty than America, but I don't even think that's true anymore. I think that Americans are being desensitized to an open border. And you and I are talking about the immigration aspects and maybe the political aspects, but then there's the whole national security aspect. You don't think that terrorists around the world have said, oh, hundreds of thousands of people just walk across that border every year. Maybe a couple of them will be Al-Qaeda.
Yes, that's a major aspect. And it's really ironic that two of the most vociferous supporters of immigration reform in the Senate, John McCain and Lindsey Graham, are both thought of as being national security hawks. So they're for national security abroad, but not necessarily on the border. I would just say one thing, though, that I think the bigger issue for many conservatives in the United States is the question of the rule of law. You mentioned, for example, that many of the illegal aliens don't pay taxes. That's true, but some do. They pay payroll taxes through their jobs, and they do so by providing either false or fraudulent Social Security numbers, or by registering for a taxpayer ID number with our IRS, and the IRS knows that these ID numbers are being abused by illegal immigrants. So essentially, those who are paying taxes are still either abusing the system or breaking the law in order to do so. The entire fiasco really is about the failure of the federal government to enforce the law and the efforts by Democrats to create a different kind of law by fiat, essentially, for illegal aliens from Central America and other parts of the world. But this is really the question. Can you have a society worth immigrating to if it's a society no longer governed by the rule of law? I mean, my family is an immigrant family, and the thing that attracted us here was not economic necessity or political repression, even though my parents did come from South Africa at the time, a very politically repressive country. But the real problem they had with South Africa was the absence of the rule of law, and they thought by coming to America they would be coming somewhere where there is the rule of law, and there has been up until now. But this blatant disregard for the Constitution and the laws by the Obama administration in an effort to shovel as many people across the border as possible in the hope that there'll be Democratic voters in the future, I think is really going to undermine the future of the United States. And, you know, it's not a good place to immigrate to anymore if it's the kind of place that doesn't treat everybody equally before the law.
Well, there's still plenty to plunder. I think you open up the borders, you'd have over 1 billion people who would still come there. To heck with the rule of law. It's better where they're from. But you're right. It is destroying America's Constitution and its rule of law, just like Obama has been found to do on other files, from the IRS and the Department of Justice to Obamacare. Those are topics for another day. Joel, great to have you on the show again. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.